Firefighters of Reddit, what was your worst? That's totally arson moment when you got a call? If you enjoy this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. This thread was made for me. My very first scene, the owners were acting super shady from the very beginning. They claimed that all of the clothes in their house, their pictures, and their TV had been stolen by the crackhead neighbors after the fire, in a terrible attempt to cover up the fact they'd moved all of their stuff out before setting the house on fire. But the real kicker was the fireproof safe sitting open in the middle of the bedroom floor and the gas can sitting open in the master bedroom closet. Their alibi was buying a canoe approximately 2 hours away at 3 AM. The next was the guy who stood no further than 2 feet from me at all times and turned increasingly white as I found more areas of fire damage that were completely separate from the rest of the fires. He'd gotten drunk and set the house on fire in 5 separate areas. Then there was the guy who set his house on fire in 3 different areas. They were on 3 separate floors. Super nice guy. We were sitting and chatting. I started to take samples of all 3 areas and he looked at me and said, "Man, you've been super cool to me. I set this place on fire. I'm sorry." Then there was the lady who had a legitimate fire on the first floor a few weeks before. She used the insurance money to pay her cousin to do the repairs to the house. Predictably, he used that money to buy weed and vodka. So she decided to have herself another fire in the basement this time. 2 fires in the space of a few months. Red flag number 1. She got 16 bottles of acetone, 1,000 cotton balls, some latex gloves, and a torch. When I first got there, I went down in the basement and found the first area of major burning on top of a bench seat that had absolutely nothing on top of it. Red flag number 2. Unfortunately, the basement was full of about 15 inches of water, so I spent the next hour draining the basement. When it drained, I was able to open a cabinet that was full of burned newspapers. Red flag number 3. I then found all 16 bottles of acetone with the caps off. Red flag number 4. I then opened an upper cabinet and found 600 of those cotton balls spread out throughout the cabinet and the smell of acetone nearly dropped me on the spot. Red flag number 5. I then opened the other cabinet right next to that and found a singed cotton ball sitting in a Coke bottle cap with a weird blue plastic around it. Turns out she had tried to do the old arson trick, where you fill a latex glove full of gas and put it over a candle. Eventually the gas will leak through the latex and, boom, you have a good fire going. Well, she filled it with acetone, which does not eat through latex and only melted when the upper layer of smoke became too hot and melted the latex, which put out the cotton ball. Red flag number 6. I then found another latex glove tied off full of acetone. Red flag number 7. And then I talked to her. She was burned in the fire. The fire department found her in the backyard naked and screaming about a dragon. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to light acetone, but it doesn't burn like gasoline. It flashes, and if it flashes close enough to you, it will light you on fire, which it did. She told me the fire attacked her. Turns out she tried to light those 16 bottles of acetone, and it flashed up and set her on fire. And that is red flag number 8. I'm sure there are others I'm forgetting. I had an apartment where the ex-boyfriend kicked in the back door and set the apartment on fire and spray painted FUB on the door. Edit. Oh, I forgot about the guy who swore up and down he had no idea how the fire started, then told me when I was starting to dig through the bedroom that I would probably find a melted gas can because he knocked it over when he sneezed and the cigarette flew out of his mouth and ignited the gas, which you might notice is not possible. Firefighter in a small casino town in Nevada got a call for a fire on the 3rd floor of a casino hotel. This casino failed inspections every year. Someone had checked in under a false name, dumped a can of gasoline on the bed, and started a fire. Luckily the sprinkler system took care of most of it. A good portion of the 3rd floor hallway was flooded, but none of the safety doors closed, no audible alarms went off, and lights only went off in the room where the fire started. None of the people staying in the rooms on either side had any idea what had happened. One was quite surprised to find us in full gear when he left his room to go gamble. There were no personal effects in the room. We never found out why this guy torched the bed, and to my knowledge he was never identified or located after the incident. Okay, I've posted this before, but it's so perfect here. Why I now look forward to being called to jury duty. Condensed, because this took more than 1/2 day. It was 30 years ago, and I still hope to see its like again. I'm on jury duty, we have to sit. Charges arson. Supposedly a farmer burned down his barn for insurance money. Prosecutor outlines the case. The farmer moved most of the stuff out of the barn into a second barn over a period of a week. A neighbor in a subdivision that backed up to the farm noticed the unusual activity. Said neighbor being outdoors a lot building a deck on his vacation. Next, the neighbor saw the farmer walking slowly around the outside of the barn pouring something from a blue gas can on the lower part of the barn walls. Farmer goes out of sight to the front of the barn, and flames erupt all along the base of the barn. Neighbor calls 911, but by the time fire department arrives 5 minutes or so later the barn is fully involved, and they just act to contain, which is essentially just standing by as they note the nearby ground has been closely mowed, possibly to prevent spread. They note the smell of diesel fuel. Police collect the farmer and take him to station. Fire investigator says definitely arson. Insurance company says the barn was insured. Defendant's lawyer says essentially nothing. Prosecutor calls witnesses. Neighbor confirms that's what he saw. Firemen say flames spread with a rapidity that was out of place even in a wooden barn, and they smelled petroleum. Investigator says there were clear marks on the ground where accelerant burned, and it still smelled of fuel after the fire died down. Police/fire investigators said there was virtually nothing in the burned barn, ruined tools or equipment, but that there was a good supply of items in the other barn that appeared to have been recently placed, including some that was sitting on grass that was still green underneath the box. No cross-examination. Defense calls the farmer, and first question asked is let's cut to the chase. Did you burn your barn down? Yup. Why did you do it? It was old and rotten, with termites. Going to fall down. Not safe. Have you always burned down old farm buildings? Yep, and my daddy did before me. It's a farm. Are you aware that you need a permit to burn debris in this county? Been doing it that way on this farm since we had dangerous engines. Never had no permit. The fine is up to $50. Oh, wait, I forgot. You are zoned active agriculture and are exempt. So, no permit needed. But, why didn't you tell any of this to the police? They didn't ask till after they put handcuffs on me and took me to the police station. They told me anything I said would be used against me and said I had the right to remain silent. And then some lawyer guy came in and told me I was going to prison for insurance fraud. I remember Perry Mason said, don't talk to anyone but your lawyer. So I didn't. Did you file an insurance claim? What for? The barn wasn't worth anything in that state, and I moved all the stuff out. I suggested we try to talk them out of this. You said you wanted your day in court. What's up with that? They came on my land, arrested me without telling me what for. Told me later it was for arson and insurance fraud, and put that in the papers. All my friends, relatives, and neighbors know about this. They made me look dishonest. I want to make sure everyone knows the real facts. I figure this is better than them just dropping it and everyone wondering whether they just decided not to send an old man to prison. Defense rests. Firefighter in New England. We had a fire at house that was undergoing renovations. Earlier that day EMS had transported the elderly father to the hospital after a fall. We get there that afternoon and the house is ripping. Ends up being a total loss. Fast forward 7 months and the son who lived with the father had transformed the former chicken coop on the property into a living space where he was now living. Now in the middle of the night this building also catches fire. The son was still on scene when we got there, told the officer where the fire was, and then promptly got in his car and left the scene to go visit his elderly father, who was apparently staying at a nearby hotel, at 3 in the morning. Our fire marshals have determined they were both accidental fires, but there are too many fishy statements going around. And now the guy has a RV on the same property and is rebuilding both the house and chicken coop. In rural firefighting, we rely on what is known as mutual aid. If one department has a fire, other nearby departments lend a hand. Pretty simple and very standard for our corridor. Usually when there has a structure fire, 5 total departments will show up. Now, at the most rural edge of our corridor is an all-volunteer department. They are good people and firefighters with good hearts, but with a limited budget. From a small tax base with little corporate income sources, comes limited proficiency. Also, this is a fully volunteer department, and we'll call them VD. Most days the station is not staffed, and many volunteers need to drive in from their houses to the station before gearing up and being ready to roll. Oftentimes when they are called to a fire, there is often a few minutes delay before they respond to the page, and then roughly 5 to 10 minute delay, at best, before they can roll out an engine or tender. Keep in mind, this is during the day. Now that is out of the way, let's get to the fire. The page comes over the station speakers, waking us from sleep at 2:30 in the morning. Volunteer department here, stand by for fire tones, followed by their specific department chime. Now everyone is sitting up in bed. If the fire tone is real, we need to get rolling too, because as I mentioned, everyone on duty in the corridor rolls to the fire. Dispatch strikes back up. Confirmed structure fire in the middle of the volunteer department's town. Everyone jumps out of bed, runs to the bay, bunks up, and hops in the engine within about 60 to 90 seconds from the tone. We are all excited, lights are on, and we begin tearing down the highway in the old girl. Now this is where things begin to get weird. As we are pulling out of the station, the VD's chief gets on the radio. He is already in his car and on scene, within 100 seconds of the tone going out. Odd for that department, but given that this was in the middle of a small town, maybe we can write it off. He gives a picture of the scene. One house appears to have smoke coming out of one side. Given how small these houses are, this means roughly 1/4 of the house is exposed to fire. At this time, all the other departments are chiming in on the radio, informing dispatch of their truck and status. En route. Things now begin to take another odd turn. We have 5 additional trucks coming in addition to VD's trucks. However, VD's chief begins to turn them away. Again, not necessarily common, but not unheard of if the fire is under control. What is odd here is that VD's trucks aren't on scene yet. The fire is progressing, and he turns away every truck except my engine, which is coming from the furthest station away. One of the closer fire departments, let's call them MOD, pikes up on the radio essentially stating, VD, we stated we are coming in our brush engine, not our brush truck, are you sure? VD chief responded with, I'm sure, you can stand down. Other department, OD responded with, negative, we are 5 minutes out, we will be on scene. I had a quick giggle in the engine. They essentially told VD to F off with that noise. We are gonna be there to fight a fire. So this is who is responding at this point. VD with their engine and tender, 3 to 4 people. Other department with their brush engine and medic, 4 people, and us. Luckily for us, we had an overstaffed engine, with every single seat filled, so we were bringing 5 people on one engine. Normally it'd be running 2. By the time we arrive on scene, the house is a total loss. We put out the remaining flames and hotspots, and my LT takes over the scene from the VD chief. After speaking with our assistant chief, again, uncommon, VD and their chief go home around 4 in the morning, leaving us and OD on scene. As we are doing overhaul, and my LT pulls me aside and asks me a question. Hey, I wanna ask, how do you think this fire started? I shrugged. It was too early to tell, but given the time of year I suggested it could have started with the furnace. Well, let me tell you this, there is no gas or electricity connected to this house. And do you know whose house this is? It is one of VD chief's vacant properties which was due to be torn down for a rebuild in a month. So this is where things clicked, why the VD chief was on scene so fast, why he turned away the apparatuses he did, and why we assumed control of the scene and sent VD and their chief home. Pretty much everyone on the corridor suspects the VD chief burned his own house and worked the scene to make sure it was a total loss. We don't think the rest of the department was in on it. Currently this is still under investigation, and I doubt much will come of it given the burden of proof needed, but the state is involved, and they really don't mess around with arson here. There are more oddities to this than I'll let on, but this is a long enough story. If you enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing.